Well, good afternoon, folks. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, pilots and non-pilots alike, wherever you may be around this wide world of sports. This is the second Tuesday of June, and you know what that means. It is time for Ask an Ambassador. You'll see my other half on the left-hand side of the screen. At least I'm looking at the left-hand side of the screen. It's Kay Sunder. I'm out on the left coast.
Good
And
evening.
how are you, Kay?
Good. How are you doing, Pat?
I couldn't be better. And also Donnie McKay, our lovely and talented producer behind the scenes. I'm not sure where he is right now, but rest assured he's lurking in the background, trying to keep us looking good. So Donnie, thank you very much. If you wanted to show your face, I'm sure folks would like to see what you look like, but I'm going to leave that totally up to you. So you may wonder, where is Jamie? We want to know the same thing. He claims to be sick. He said something about dengue fever. I'm not sure I believe that, Kay. Do you?
I think I do.
You
Or else
believe
he
that?
loves being a part of Ask an Ambassador. So he
Dengue
must.
fever. It seems to me kind of far-fetched. I think he's just blowing us off because he wants to go out on the beach and have a margarita or a Mai Tai, given that he does live on the other side of the coast, very close to beautiful, beautiful water. So we're going to carry on as best we can without him and wish him a speedy recovery. In fact, if you're watching out there and you want to say, get well, Jamie, go ahead and jump right on the comment section and say, get well, Jamie, and we'll pass it right along to him. So,
And he might be watching too.
He might be watching. You never know. He kind of lurks in the background, kind of like Donnie. They are two of a kind. We're going to be talking about being a good neighbor tonight. You know, pilots are just a teeny, tiny minority of people here. We make up only about 0.2% of the overall pilot population. So it's kind of important that we act in a way that benefits all of us. There's more of them than there is of us. And noise complaints around airports are always an issue. So we thought we'd talk a little bit about that and how we might be best prepared, I guess, to protect our rights and privileges of pilots, because those privileges can go away if we're not careful and take care to be good neighbors. So we're going to be talking a lot about how to be good neighbors tonight to the locals, and how we can also be more courteous to our fellow pilots. We might talk a little bit about that too. And of course, as always, even though our topic tonight is be a good neighbor, we are ready, willing, and able to talk about anything that you might want to talk about. So just stick that into the chat section. And we got a howdy from Andy Espinoza, one of my old buddies here in Houston, one of my pilot buddies in Houston. Hey, Andy, thanks. Glad you finally figured out how to log on and join us. So that's a good thing. Donnie, if you can throw up slide number 4, I think that is. I think it's kind of an interesting graphic to look at. This is the slide that talks about the number of airports that we have in the United States. We have some 19,000 in the United States, but take a look at how they are broken down. Only about 380 of them are airports that serve commercial airliners. About just under 3,000 of them serve GA and community airports. But the interesting thing about that is in about the last 40 years or so, 50 years maybe, we've lost about 2,000 GA airports in the United States, 2,000 of them. And that trend is sadly is continuing. And some of it is just development. Some of it is noise issues and so on and so forth. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Now, Scott Hutchinson just pointed out that our YouTube feed is down. So I don't know what there is about that. I don't know, Donnie, if you can look into that in the background, but apparently the YouTube feed's down. So sorry about that. Kate, you're on the West Coast. I don't imagine you probably have any challenges with airports out there, do you?
Oh my goodness, there's a lot of airports under attack, and now I am in Palomar, which is in the San Diego area. Very, very busy airspace, and all around Southern California, I think we are known to be the busiest airspace in the world. It's extremely tough to find an airport where there isn't some sort of noise abatement procedure, whether it's formal or not. And it's really important that we are good citizens and we fly friendly and at least know what those procedures are. And so, in my neck of the woods, there is departure procedures every direction that you are going to leave an airport, and special arrival procedures for all the major airports around here. So it is part of the training. The opportunity to fly a standard pattern is pretty slim around here. It's all modified, and you have to know what you're expected to do, because if you don't fly some of those procedures properly, you're going to upset a lot of people, and that's only going to hurt the entire industry and our freedom to fly in the future.
You bet. Now, Andy actually just chimed in. He said that he's hearing that WHP, is that out in your area of Van
It
Nuys?
is. It's just north of the LA area near Van Nuys Airport.
He said that he hears
Yes.
that they're getting heat from the community out there. Have you heard anything like that?
Yep, absolutely. That area is also very, very busy. All of the main GA airports in San Diego and LA. We know about the issues at Santa Monica, right? I think we've all heard of that one. That's a really it's a sad story. It's a long fight, and it's a very classic example of what will happen to other airports if we don't follow the noise abatement procedures and really do our due diligence in educating the community about all the value that the airport provides.
Airports, general aviation, I think airports, aviation in general in the United States is a $219 billion contribution to the GNP. So, or GDP, I should say. So, when we start losing airports and losing aviation in the communities, it can be a huge financial hit. I think Donnie has a graphic of the Santa Monica airport for no other reason than just to kind of show that example of community creep. How it. Let's see. That's the. Is
We
that
have
the?
to That's a traffic pattern, and you know what? I'll talk about that if we can put that back up. For the airport, first of all, it's a reliever airport to Los Angeles International LAX, and
Right.
it's an active airport with 270 based aircraft. It's a former World War II military airfield, and it's used by business charter operators, firefighters, flight schools, a lot of charity organizations, and there's the city council and local anti-airport groups have been trying to close the airport since the 1980s. This has been a long fight, claiming, noise complaints, safety, and pollution, and the city wants to use the land for recreation parks. And and obviously, the FAA and aviation groups oppose closing. There's several legal actions that have been initiated. But this particular graphic shows what we pilots really need to know, and what we need to do if we take a look at the airports right near the coast. Right, you don't have to be from this area to actually understand what I'm trying to point out here. But typically, there's a westerly flow, and if you're using runway 21, the standard traffic pattern is left, but they want you to fly over the golf course. You can see that in the graphic just west of the airport. And then the procedure requires initial 10-degree left turn over the VOR and then a right turn to overfly the length of the golf course. And they don't want you to initiate the left turn prior to the VOR. And in the graphic, it'll show you all of that. If we look at, okay, Donnie, can you put up the next graphic? This is a very, very different way of exiting the airport. You can see in the graphic, if you're taking off of runway 21, you go over the golf course, you fly a 225-degree course, go out to the shoreline, past the Santa Monica Pier. So you're making a climbing 270-degree turn, and then you're coming back to the golf course on the east side of that and flying southbound. And so this is an example where you can't just turn left crosswind just
That's
because you're going south.
crazy, Kay. I mean, I'm looking at that and thinking, good Lord Almighty, that is so complicated. And there's the infamous golf course, I think, where Harrison Ford put his Ryan down in, right?
Right. Yeah. And then look at the arrival procedure too. You don't just enter in on a left 45 for runway 21 onto downwind there. You fly over the field
Yeah.
and then you loop around, you come in. And so this is the arrival, the procedures from the special flight rules area, or that we call it CIFRA. We just wanted to throw that up there because
Yeah.
this is not your standard departure arrival procedure, right?
Oh, no,
You
not hardly.
need to you need to know this ahead of time, and not just for this airport, but for a lot of the other airports around here. They have these unique flows, and that's all I wanted to show about on this graphic here.
Yeah.
There
Christopher
are
Ritchie
many
says,
transition routes.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
There are many transition routes within the LA airspace, and you got to be
Yeah.
familiar. That's pretty unique to this area. How are you going to navigate VFR to get a Class Bravo? And
Yeah.
uh, in this area, if you don't,
There it
uh,
is right there.
oh, there's a graphic there. Yeah,
Yeah, that's really interesting. We don't have anything at all that complicated here in Houston. Houston is actually by Class Bravo standards actually fairly simple airspace. We don't have anything that remotely resembles that. You have to go to Dallas, where you have Addison, and some other really landlocked airports to get anything that's at least reasonably similar to what you're looking at there. Christopher Ritchie says, if they take federal funding, does that mean they are safe for 20 years? And I think that's part of the battle out there at Santa Monica, isn't it? Because they've taken federal money.
that's right. They have, and that's why they can't just shut it down right now. But it's an airport that we're always going to keep our eyes on, and there's some other ones all over the country that we need to make sure that the general public is also aware of what the facts are. Are
Right.
we actually the ones that are making the noise? Are we the ones creating pollution? Are we the ones who are not following, or is it one particular or two people who are very upset that they live on the final approach course
Yeah.
and they hear the noise? But the bottom line is, we as pilots, we can never say, the airport was here first. And so just that's just not a good excuse. We need to do our due diligence and be good pilots and comply with those noise abatement procedures. And they're
Yeah.
not that hard. Even that one that we just showed, yes, it's a climbing right 270-degree turn, very unusual, but go with an instructor, and then it's not going to be a big deal.
Yeah, it's just like moving to a new town where you have to learn the roads and so on and so forth, where you can do it without necessarily having to have a map in front of you or Google Maps or something like that. It's just a matter of like, oh, there's the golf course. I can do this. Now I got to go do there, and I got to make a big climbing turn, and off we go. And after a time or two, it's probably not a very big deal. But to us flatlanders here, it seems like, oh my God, that's terrible. So.
Oh, and the landmarks they make very prominent landmarks.
Yeah.
You don't need a moving map. You don't need your ForeFlight. You just our WingX, Garmin Pilot, whatever aviation app you're using. You don't need any of that. You just need to look outside the window,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
you'll be able to see. They are very prominent landmarks.
Well, while we're talking about California airports for a minute here, Costas said he flies out of WHP, but he's mentioned Whiteman. And I'm sure you're familiar with that. There have been some accidents out there. I think the most recent one, wasn't it that airplane that landed close to the railroad tracks or something like that, and the train took it out, and that was a while back. But
It was.
can you talk a little bit about that?
I don't know, too much on that particular instance, so I'm going to pass on that.
Okay, yeah, I know nothing but beyond what I've seen on YouTube as far as the very impressive video. So, we know here in Houston, we have a couple of interesting things that are going on right now. Donnie, if you can throw up the West Houston traffic pattern, that would be handy. That's perfect. So West Houston is located on the west side of town, hence the name West Houston. 15 and 33 are the runways. When we're taking off to the north, the winds are generally southeast. Prevailing winds are generally southeast. But when we're taking off to the north, you can see that there's almost an immediate jog to the left, and that keeps us out of the residential area that we'd fly over if we departed straight out. So we fly that about 30 degrees off the runway, heading to within 300 feet of the traffic pattern altitude, and then we turn a relatively brief crosswind before we head downwind. The traffic pattern to runway 15 is actually just a pretty standard rectangular traffic pattern, but you can. It's hard to see by that graphic there, but imagine taking off runway 15 to the southeast, and you're over nothing but trees for about 1.5 miles before you get to a berm, which is a part of a reservoir that you might be able to land on top of if you lose an engine, but it's pretty narrow. So your chances or your choices, if you have a real catastrophic engine failure as you're taking off on runway 15, aren't very good. So, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about noise abatement. And there's another interesting situation that's developing here. I talk about creep, and we don't have a graphic for it. That's okay. But at the Pearland Airport, the developers of that airport have sold off a parcel of land within the airport fence, from what I understand, and it's being developed for 40, I think it's 45 manufactured homes that are, and there's work being done, I think, within like 30 feet of the runway with no flags or anything like that. So there's some real safety issues there, and it's going to be real interesting to see if that development goes through, what happens in terms of noise abatement there, because these are just residential homes, I guess, not being developed for pilots necessarily. So that's going to be very interesting to see with the development that's essentially on the airport, and how all that plays out. Donnie, I think we've got a graphic for the Conroe Airport. I think that's number 9. This is Conroe is the north side of town, and it's a busy reliever airport. That's the one right there. It has several big flight schools on it, and some smaller ones, and a couple of flying clubs that operate out of there. And if you take a look at that oval circle, that red area right there, work has already been done clearing trees, and they're already putting down roads and things like that. There's actually a subdivision going up right there. I was out there a few days ago, and they had us landing on runway 19, which is where that subdivision is being developed. And sure enough, you're on short final, and you're coming in at 400 or 500 feet right over the houses that are going to be developed there. So it's going to be really, really interesting. I had a tenant at that airport call me a while back and tell me about it. They hadn't broken ground yet for it, and wondering if they were going to end up having to put in a displaced threshold on runway 19, and what could he do about it. And I don't know what he can do about it. I just suggested that he call the airport manager and have a conversation with them or with the management, and see what their thinking is in terms of the long-term cohabitation with that brand new development, because you got to know that at some point they're going to get some complaints. So I would be a little bit concerned about that, Kay.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Hey, before we move on to the next topic, Erica Pittman asked a good question about Santa Monica. What would you do if the winds didn't favor runway 21, and can you not arrive the opposite direction? Absolutely, you can. And Donnie, can we put that graphic back up for the Santa Monica, the number 1, the other one there? Thank you. So if we're landing on runway 3, because there's easterly flow, it is the standard pattern is right. You would turn crosswind over the 405 freeway, and if you're going southbound and you're going to use the special flight rules area, then you would make a left climbing 270-degree turn to fly southeast along. This is not on this particular graphic, but I'm just letting you know what the procedure is. You look it up in the chart supplement and some of these other materials for noise abatement procedure, but you would fly southeast along the Santa Monica 132 radial at 3,500 feet. And what's important to know is there's no crosswind turns prior to the 405 freeway. So that's what you would do if it is an easterly flow, which is rare, but that can happen. And we just don't happen to have the graphics for that right now. But this is where it's really important to know what these procedures are. And one source that I like to use a lot is airnav.com. So if you go to that website, just about all the ones that I've seen that have special procedures, if you scroll down to the very bottom, they will show you the actual noise abatement procedure. So I'm just looking at a graphic that I printed out from airnav.com, and there's a lot of colorful ones. This is at my home base, and we're gonna talk about this a little bit later. But they're trifolds, and it's really nice. And you can find this at many different sources, but at least AirNav, they will point you to either the airport website or where that graphic is. It might be a pilots association, it might be a flight school or flying club. It's not used for navigation, it's just for reference, but this is where you would find that information.
Yeah, most airports have left-hand traffic patterns. In fact, if you look at 91.126, it actually says that all turns shall be made to the left unless otherwise designated by the airport. So those left-hand traffic patterns may end up being right-hand traffic patterns, and it could be because there are residential developments or perhaps a city, town, village, what have you, on the other side of the airport. So it's really important to check your map, your sectional. Typically, it'll have RP with a number or numbers underneath the airport data block. The chart supplement, a ForeFlight or one of the other apps, if you happen to use one of those, typically will tell you if you've got right-hand traffic or some sort of and again, normally the traffic patterns are flown at 1,000 feet HEL, but that's not cut in stone. We've got an airport here in Houston, Ellington Airfield, down the southeast side of town, where traffic pattern is, if I'm not mistaken, it's been a while since I've been there, I think 600 feet. That's significantly different than 1,000 feet, but if you fly at 1,000 feet, you're going to be very close to infringing on Hobby, which is a Class Bravo airspace airport. So, and they want to keep you down below incoming traffic into Hobby. So it's 600 feet. And if you come into the traffic pattern above 600 feet, the tower will tell you nicely but firmly that you should be down at 600 feet. And
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, speaking of that 91.126 about the left-hand traffic pattern, if you fly a traffic pattern that is opposite or a counter to what the airport outlines it to be, you're actually in violation of the regs. And if your friendly FAA examiner happened to be, I don't mean examiner, your inspector happened to be on the field that day, and it witnessed you making a right-hand base entry into the final approach on a left-hand traffic pattern, it might not be a pleasant day for you. And unfortunately, that happens a lot at non-towered fields. It happens at ours at West Houston. Clearly, left-hand traffic pattern, but occasionally you have people. Tends to be the corporate folks, but it's not limited to them by any stretch. Coming in on a right-hand base and announcing that some miles out, and it's just dangerous. So flying a proper traffic pattern, not only from a noise abatement standpoint, but from just a pure safety standpoint, is incredibly important. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned about the 600 elevation, 600 MSL for the traffic pattern, and that's due to airspace in your example, not encroaching on another airport's airspace. But what I've seen around here is it's almost always higher than 1,000 feet AGL because of noise. And my home base is a perfect example where the elevation is 331, but the lowest traffic pattern, and there's one for turbine and there's one for props, and is 1,500. So if you come in assuming, okay, it's 331, the traffic pattern is 1,300, you're not going to be looked upon very favorably. So you need to know that, okay, Palomar Airport, it's right-hand turns, and it's a lot of times you'll get extended on down because it's a very busy airport. And actually, let's go ahead and put that graphic up if we can, Donnie, the first one of Palomar, since we're already talking about that. Yeah, so you can see how congested it is. All the yellow is the noise sensitive areas. I mean, pretty much what you're looking at is all yellow, right? And then the red is the suggested arrival track, and then the blue is the suggested departure track. And then they have, the touch and go pattern you can see is right hand turns into runway 24. Usually do have westerly winds, but it's important for when you're departing from runway 24. We ask for what's called an alpha north or alpha south departure, and we fly 250 track north of Palomar Airport Road until we join the coastal VFR flyway, and that's on a different chart. I'm not going to go into that because that's a little beyond what our discussion is here. And it's really important that you wait until you get to the shoreline before you turn north, because it's all of the residential communities and the arrival procedures too. You can see how congested it is, and there's a mix of different aircraft and helicopters and airplanes and jets and turbines. A lot of training going on at this airport, and right now we don't have a commercial service, but it's been on and off, and so it is one of the busiest airports in the country, single runway airports. And so you absolutely need to be aware of this, and this is voluntary noise abatement procedure, but all the pilots I know, we try really hard to comply with this, because this airport has also been under attack, and we want to be good citizens, and we want to make sure that we comply with these procedures, even if they're voluntary. Because if we don't, then this is going to be another, Santa Monica or the airport that we're fighting to keep open.
Does Palomar, the airport management, do they take an active role in community relations? What do they do, if anything?
Oh, absolutely. My goodness, the airport, and we also have Palomar Airport Association, PAA. This is probably one of the most active airport associations that I've seen in my aviation career. And I'm not saying that because I'm based here and I know the folks there, and I'm involved with it, because it's a fact. Every month, in fact, we get together. Second Thursdays, come and join us anytime, 5 o'clock, and there's a guest speaker. We meet at the restaurant there. It's a really nice a nice gathering, and one that attracts anywhere from 50 to 100 people a month, every month. I think we just take a break in December, and other than that, there's always a guest speaker, and a lot of it's a nice general aviation activity, right? Flying is great, but the other part of it is the social events and the get-togethers, and so this airport does a great job in promoting that, and also really promoting all the activities that are going on, and also host airport days. And I've personally taken a bunch of kids and had an airport day at the airport that was just fantastic, where we had hundreds of kids learning about different airplanes, and it was great. They are very engaged with the community.
Well, there's nothing like having management that recognizes how important that is, because PR is, boy, it's just about everything right there. So let's see. We had a question here. Christopher Ritchie says, if you don't follow noise abatement, is that grounds for a notice of disapproval? And I'm assuming he's talking about a check ride situation. And that's a really good question, Christopher. I've been kind of cogitating on it a little bit here while Kate was talking. And the answer is, it probably depends. If it's a noise abatement procedure that is, I guess, perhaps standard procedure that airport are required at that airport, then I could see where that could be the case, where it could be a notice of disapproval. There is a regulation that says that and I think it's 91-103, that says you're supposed to know all available information before you go fly. Well, if all available information includes noise abatement, then that could potentially be a reason for disapproval. It might not be a disapproval if that was the only mistake that you made, or one of the very few mistakes that you made on a check ride. But if it was kind of a sloppy check ride, that might just be the thing that just, tipped it in favor of a disapproval. So the best answer I can give you from my perspective would be, It probably depends. We don't have any of those kind of situations around here. So honestly, I've never been faced with that. But I would imagine, Kay, if I came out to California and started doing some rides at Palomar or any of those airports that you've talked about, obviously I would want to make sure I knew what the procedures were, so that I could be knowledgeable about it before we jump in with an applicant and go commit some aviation.
Absolutely. And keep in mind that some of these procedures are specifically noise abatement procedures. Others are just, they might be obstacle departure procedures. They may be just mandatory departure arrival procedures. So those you must know about. The voluntary noise abatement, when I teach it, I make it, this is mandatory. Even though we use the word voluntary, that's just being a good citizen.
Yeah.
But the obstacle departure procedures is something that I ask all pilots, whether you don't have to be instrument rated. It's still good to know if there is an obstacle departure procedure in place, there's a reason for it, and you don't have to be just in IMC conditions to worry about it.
Yeah. Yeah. You bring up an excellent point too, because flight instructors are key to a lot of this, aren't they? And you said you teach it as really mandatory, even though in reality it perhaps is voluntary. But teaching those noise abatement procedures to your students, really any student, flight review or I guess an introductory flight, really, or anything, right from the word go, you want to talk about that, pointing out noise sensitive areas and the like. Making sure they fly the right traffic pattern altitude, all of those kind of things. Anything else that you might, I guess, probably make a point of just kind of regular teaching for you?
It's the airspace around here. We are in such busy airspace that you always have to know where one entity's airspace begins and ends.
Yeah.
And so that becomes a challenge for somebody that's new to this area, and was for me when I first came out here. And I have flown in very busy airspace. I started my training in the New York area. It was called TCA at that time,
Yeah.
right? The Class Bravo Airspace
Remember that?
in Long Island. It was the TCA. And so from between there and flying Washington, D.C. and San Francisco area, I was used to busy airspace. But when I came down here, it's a whole different ballgame. I mentioned very briefly about the different transition routes to the Class Bravo airspace in L.A. That is very unique to this area. And so I needed to sit down and do some chair flying. I always talk about chair flying every time I'm speaking, because it's such a valuable tool. And in this case, it's to sit and look through the charts and really understand what the procedure is, and then to go out and fly it. But I was a CFI, a double I, and I still needed to spend a few hours looking at those charts, the terminal area charts, before going out and starting my flying in this area.
Yeah, that's the airspace you're in out there is incredibly complex, and we just don't have anything. I mean, Dallas is it's more complex than Houston, but it's nothing like LA. So I have all.
But
nothing.
it's worth it.
Huh? Well, I have
It's
nothing but
absolutely worth
inspiration.
it. The sunsets here, the sunrise. Oh, it's amazing along the coast. It's worth every minute you spend chair flying. Come on out and fly this area.
San Diego is absolutely gorgeous. We spend a lot of time talking about airport and traffic patterns and things like that, but it's really not just that. Almost every airport has a practice area if they have a flight school, and airplanes are always out there doing ground reference maneuvers and steep turns and stalls and slow flight and all that other kind of stuff. And of course, the ACS is very clear when they talk about ground reference maneuvers, and that is to select an area where you're not over a populated area or wooded areas. In other words, select areas that you can land at if you have to, if you have an emergency. So from a flight instructor standpoint, we should also be pointing out when we're doing turns about a point, or in the case of a commercial training, 8s on pylons, or rectangular patterns, again, back to the private pilot thing, or S-turns across the road, any of those ground reference maneuvers where the ACS tells us that we have to be between 600 and 1,000 feet AGL. 600 feet is not very high. And then you run into the the regs that talk about minimum altitudes that you can fly around congested and non-congested areas alike. So it really is incumbent upon us as CFIs to make sure that our students understand what they should be doing, where and when, and how they can do this stuff out in the practice area too, because we want to be good neighbors and not spark any complaints.
Right. And some places you have to fly quite a bit to practice your landings. You can't do it at your home base. And we were talking about Santa Monica before. I know some of the entities out there. I personally haven't trained there. I've flown in and flown out, but I have spoken to some of the flight schools and flying clubs out there, and they tell me that they take their students, they fly to Torrance. So they're flying down south, going to another airport, and part of that is to avoid the landing fees. But there are some places where the practice area is not close by. And so what the instructor typically does in that scenario is make use of that en route time and talk about some other things. And then you get to the practice area and you do your maneuvers. But I am curious to see from our audience, where are you from? If you can just type in what airport and spell it out, and also let us know if you have any noise abatement procedures in your home base. Curious to know who's on board here.
Yeah, I think that'd be a great idea. So just type in there and let us know what airport you fly out of, and if you do or don't have any issues with noise abatement, or really anything else. Again, we are open to questions about anything that you might want to ask, even though we have to be talking about noise abatement and flying nicely here. Michael Hill says, hello, aviation family. How about a grant so I can get my private pilot license? Well, good luck with that. But depending on how old you are, there is scholarship money available from AOPA. If you go to AOPA, and Donnie just put that up. Donnie, you are so good. It was like you were reading our minds. If you want to apply for a scholarship, they are awarded about this time every year. Kay, do you remember? I know I'm going to put you on the spot. Do you remember when the applications open? I can't remember, but
you know what? We're gonna Donnie or we're gonna look it up because that's important. We just closed this last pool, and we've awarded all the applicants have been notified, and I know that I believe was done by May 31st, and so we've got a few more months before it reopens, and then I believe the deadline is in February of 2023.
Yeah, I was thinking it was sometime in August that they opened, but I'm sure that
I believe it's September 1st. But Donnie, if you don't mind checking for both of us, I think it reopens in September. But we'll get back to you guys in a second.
Well, we have a hello from Chino, California, and from Alamosa, Colorado. From Greenville, Illinois. It's in the boonies, so there aren't any noise abatement. No noise abatement out here. I've flown out of airports that are in the boonies, and God love them. They're awesome. My buddy Martin Kastenbaum, who just got to fly a brand new Archer that's owned by the U.S. Flight Club over there, says that there's no issues at TMA. Again, that one is kind of out in the middle of the boonies too. Doug Miller says, what can we do to encourage municipal airports to build hangars? Wow. In the DFW area, there are multi-year waiting lists. Well, Doug, all I can tell you is, welcome to the club. We have similar situations depending on where we are here in the Houston area, Austin, San Antonio, all of those places are challenging. Kay, I'm sure you guys have the same situation, even with the outrageous hangar fees you guys have.
True. It's very busy. Yep. There's a wait list, but the demand is there.
Yeah. So, Doug, all kidding aside, one of the things that you might consider doing is visiting your local airport. I don't know which one you're closest to, but assuming it's not one like Addison, you might visit your local airport. Take a look at the minimum at their airport minimum standards, and see if there's anything that's addressed in the minimum standards document that talks about airport development and what's required for developing, depending on the airport, there may be land leases available where you can sign a long-term lease and build some hangars on there. The downside, of course, is that at some point that agreement will sunset and the airport, the hangars will revert back to the airport as far as the ownership goes. But oftentimes you can renew those leases for years, and maybe a 20-year lease you can renew for another 20, and then an option for another 20 after that. So I'm very serious about that. You might look at your airport minimum standards and the grant assurances that go along with that and see if it's possible. You may be able to put together a consortium of people that are willing to invest in that, and you'll make your investment back because, again, there are multi-year waiting lists at an awful lot of airports around here, and it's just for lack of somebody who has the wherewithal to develop those things that could be the difference. So that might be something to think about. Jamie Beckett actually happens to be online. He must have pulled himself away from his margarita or his sick bed. I'm not sure still what to believe there. Dengue fever, Jamie. I don't buy that. Naples, Florida won't fuel between 9:30 p.m. and 6:30 a.m. It's an effort to limit or stop night flying for noise reduction. So that's really interesting, as to whether or not they can get away with that. If someone tried to litigate that, it would be interesting. Again, I don't know anything at all about the politics there, but it would be interesting to see if somebody tried to litigate that, if they could make a case for it. Dave Everhart says, hi, Kay and Pat, great discussion. I fly out of San Carlos, California, SQL, where noise abatement procedures are established. So, Kay, do you know much about that one?
I do. In fact, Dave, I used to be based at Palo Alto. That's where I got my CFI certificate, and I'm very familiar with that area. And I have a stack of noise abatement, these little cards. And Dave, you're familiar with this one, San Carlos. And he's right. There is special noise abatement procedure. This is another area where it is very busy. I kept the stack up here just in case there's some conversation on certain airports, and I love these cards, and you can pick these up at the airport. Just about every airport I go to, I'll snatch one or maybe two, and I can pass on to students, and I love that because it has a lot of information. Unfortunately, some of this is not in the chart supplement. It's not in some of the aviation apps. They are made by the airport, and you'll see the hard copies there at the airport, and majority of them are online. I mentioned about airnav.com, but grab them because they're real handy, and there's a lot of good information in these little trifolds. And I literally have a stack here from over the years of going to different airports. And San Carlos is that whole area in the Bay Area is busy, and there's not a lot of real estate that you're not going to encroach on. So you need to know what those special procedures are. Now, there's one other comment I wanted to bring up. Scott mentions that somebody had a birthday, and there's so many comments on that. And he asked me to sing happy birthday to you. So I'm going to pass on that because you don't want to hear me sing. But all of you just say happy birthday to Pat in the chat feature, please. In lieu of me singing. Trust me, that'll be better for everybody. But happy birthday, Pat.
Thank you very much, Kay. Scott, in the words of, remember that old 80s or 70s maybe sitcom Maude? Remember that one, Kay? You probably not old enough to remember that, but she had a catchphrase that says, God will get you for that. So Scott is one of my best buddies. He and I were roommates along with several other of our closest friends at Sun and Fun, and we were about to repeat the same thing. He didn't piss me off too badly at Sun and Fun, so we're going to repeat the experiment up at Oshkosh here in a few weeks. So he'll be flying his 210, and my partner and I will be flying our Comanche up there. So thank you, everybody, for your kind, happy birthday wishes. This is one I'm not counting anymore after this one.
Pat just turned 49, right? Is it? You got a big one coming up.
That's it, Kay, 49. Yeah.
49.
I have shoes older than 49. So look, I'm still vertical. That's all that matters. So I'm a happy camper. So Scott did say, on a little bit more serious note, Scott did say I would be interested in a future Ask an Ambassador session that focused on the special procedures for the complex airspace of Southern California, New York, etc. So we'll have to look at that, Scott, and see what we can do about that. I have very little experience flying in the New York airspace. And Kay, you probably find the most complex airspace of all three of us, because Jamie's down in Florida, so Orlando isn't all that complex, although it is busy. I'm not sure we could fill up a full hour, but hey, I didn't think we could fill up a full hour on noise abatement either, and we're 45 minutes into it. So.
Oh, I can fill up a weekend on the airspace out here in
Oh
Southern
yeah.
California. So, Scott, we'll get back to you. We have to consult with our Pat, or Pat. We got to consult with Jamie on that. But I think
Yeah, he is after all our fearless leader, even though I don't think he's suffering from dengue fever. I still think he's on the beach with a Mai Tai, but time will tell on that. So you mentioned the argument about the airport was here first, and Donnie, I think we've got a slide on that one. Yeah, as good as it might feel for us as pilots to be able to say, what the heck is the matter with you? You knew there was an airport here when you moved here. I mean, that's a very satisfying thing to say, because it's kind of like shaking your finger at somebody that said you should have known better, and kind of a nice way of calling them idiots. But it doesn't solve the problem. So this is a slide that I took off of an an airport just what we got, our ASN, Airport Support Network slideshow that just basically talks about some noise abatement techniques: fly higher, fly tighter pattern, fly a steeper final approach course instead of carrying 60-70% power because you're flying low and slow and behind the power curve all the way down the glide slope. All those bullet points right there. I don't want to just read off of them, but essentially just kind of pay attention to those things. And I think the second bullet point there, where it says pilots and airport managers should embrace the complaints and really do show an interest in working with the surrounding folks. You never know when somebody bought a house somewhere. I mean, they may truly not have realized that there was an airport close by. Perhaps the real estate people were less than forthcoming. I mean, maybe there just wasn't much activity over at the airport when they looked at the house. But you never know. Doug Miller says, how are they going to regulate noise abatement if I think you meant VTOLs, vertical takeoff and landings, actually become feasible? That's going to be a real interesting, exercise. I think those things are generally electric, so I'm not sure that we're going to be talking about a great deal of engine noise. I mean, there's certainly the sound of spinning rotors, but I think most of those things are electric, so that may not be much of an issue. But I don't know. Time will tell on that. I suspect that we'll have some learning as Walmart and Amazon and some of these other mega retailers experiment with drone deliveries. Depending on the size of the drone, there's certainly noise associated with that. Doug says the props are loud. And I'll take your word for it, Doug. I don't really know. All I've really seen is just videos out there that probably that everybody else has seen. So it's kind of really hard to tell from that. So time will tell. I'm hearing from certain sources here in Houston that we're going to start seeing some of those drone delivery companies appear in the Houston area in the not too distant future. So I'll let you know if I order something that gets delivered by a drone. We'll be talking about it. So, but I wish I could help you there. Andy Espinosa says 33. Yeah, Andy, you're right. It's 33. That's exactly right. 33 years old. So, okay, anything? And Donnie, if you wouldn't mind, there's a slide there, I think it's slide number 3, that talks about noise abatement. There are no less than 9 advisory circulars out there that the FAA has created. This is just one of them, but there are no less than 9 advisory circulars that address noise abatement. So, if you're so inclined and you're interested, you can just get on, Google. Google's the repository of the entire world's knowledge at this point. So you can get on Google and just Google noise abatement advisory circulars. I'm sure you'll find a lot of information on that. If you have trouble sleeping at night, just read one of those circulars. That will fix it real quickly. But there's some good information on that kind of stuff. So there's 9 of them out there. So you might want to avail yourselves of that. Kaya, we're kind of getting close to the end of another fun-filled time here. Anything that you want to? Don't you have a slide on Ocean View? Isn't that one of the airports?
Oceanside.
Oceanside. I'm sorry. Like I said,
put that one up because that's a really good airport to come into. And one of the reasons I love going to Oceanside, besides the fact that it's a great location, is that you can land there and then get some bikes that are for free, and take the bike and go down the path and go out to the ocean and just hang out and come back and put the bike back and depart. They are really, really friendly, and they have connected to the wider community, and the airport administration is so pleasant, and like this example with the bikes, right? So come on out to Oceanside, but make sure that you're aware of this particular graphic here. You can see that it's a very, very non-standard pattern, correct? So if you're looking at the red, that is all the noise sensitive areas. You really want to be careful, and they are located in areas that are easy to find. If you know where the highways, the 76 is, you can see south of that, there are 2 areas, and then just north of the airport. But if you're departing runway 24, which is most likely the case because the winds are from the west, you're going to climb at best angle of climb to 500 feet, and then they ask that you reduce the power by 100 RPM or 1 inches of manifold pressure, if it's possible. And then you follow the river past the harbor before turning, because that's where the most noise sensitive area is, along the north and south side of that river. And they ask you not to fly over the houses. Stay, above the riverbed all the way to the coast. So it's a long upwind. Then you turn crosswind along the shoreline, and then you turn downwind, and then you can see the yellow, and then you turn base after the road. When you're coming into the airport, you're going to look for the water tower, and that's the pink line that shows you the entry. So it's a right 45 into runway, and actually it's runway 25 now. We changed the numbers there recently, and so I keep saying 24, but I'm at 25. But look at the water tower and look how close it is to Camp Pendleton. That's the military airspace is shown in purple. So you need to fly to the water tower and then turn right into right downwind for runway 25. So this is a procedure that is really important to know, because Oceanside Airport is also under attack, and there's a lot of communities that are close by, and these landmarks are pretty prominent. So there's no reason not to follow it. It's not complicated. They have these handouts right at the airport. You can print this out online. You can go to AirNav, and you'll see a link to the airport, Oceanside Airport, and then download this. There's a lot of other information in the brochure. We just put up the graphic, but the entire procedure is actually spelled out for you here. So the information is easy to digest.
So piggybacking a little bit on, I think Eric Pittman asked this earlier about opposite direction traffic. If the winds were favoring the other runway, is it the same traffic pattern just in reverse?
It's slightly different there. So it's very rare that we do. I mean, I would say in the years that I've been here, it's I've probably flown an easterly flow at both Palomar and Oceanside maybe twice in several years.
Yeah.
You can, but it's explained in the brochure the same way. They don't have a graphic for it, but because it's very rarely used. But there
Right.
is a procedure for either direction. They're never going to force you to land in a tailwind situation because sometimes that's not safe. And now I want to back up here. There are some airports that are one way in, one way out, and if you can't do that because of terrain, then you don't go to that airport. There are cases; these two airports are not in that boat.
Right. Well, if you find airports that are, um, I guess, that are at risk, um, any kind of community outreach that you can do, or the Rotary Club, the Exchange Club, the Kiwanis Club, local, I guess, any local community organization, um, try to connect with local schools, especially those with STEM programs, and maybe get the kids interested in the airport, and get the kids interested, and get the parents interested, and maybe there's a reason to try to help save some of these airports that that might be at risk. Donnie, we've got a slide on the Airport Support Network program here. Can you throw that up real quick as we begin to wrap things up? So you can see the bullet points there on the left, where you can see the genesis of this organization. But this is a volunteer group of people that work with AOPA. They do not work for AOPA. They're not paid. It's a totally volunteer position. But if anyone who is listening or watching tonight knows of an airport close by that might be in trouble, or even not in trouble, but just where you as a viewer might want to get involved with the goings on at that particular airport, essentially what you do is you become the eyes and ears of AOPA at that airport. There have been a number of occasions over the years where we have gotten wind of things that are about to happen or being talked about at any given particular airport. I mean, it could be a cell phone tower that's too close to the field, or any number of things that might maybe an unfriendly city council, or even an unfriendly airport manager. But any number of things over the years we have been able to get involved with, not with a heavy hammer, and not threatening legal action or bringing the wrath of the FAA down on them or anything like that, but just as a way that perhaps we can offer some resources, some suggestions, maybe some way that these things can be mediated between the parties if it came down to that. Cavalier 102.5 says, I wish the governor would provide grant money for established small private airports. What state are you from, Cavalier? In the state of Texas, we're a block grant state. And basically what that means is the FAA money goes to the TxDOT, and TxDOT doles it out. Small private airports, if they are truly private airports and they ask for money, that money comes with strings attached. And sometimes you may not like the strings that are attached. So kind of be careful what you ask for, because you might get it. So Cavalier, if you can let me know what state you're referring to. Indiana. Okay. I know nothing about Indiana. I suspect you have a Department of Transportation up there. I don't know if the governor controls that money, or if it's the Department of Transportation there. I suspect it's the Department of Transportation if it's a block grant state. If it's not, it's going to come from the FAA, and it would really be up to the owners of those private airports to make a grant application to the FAA, as I understand it. But I am not an expert in that case. Do you have any knowledge about that process?
No, I'm not familiar with that.
Okay. Well, that actually, that's probably as good a note to end on right now as any. We don't know. So
There
We're
is one other thing I want to mention, though. I encourage the audience to, to work with the airport administration wherever it is you are, to make the airport more comfortable for the general public. I'm not talking about for you, but I'm talking about for the general public, and and help the airport make it more inviting. Believe it or not, there's so many people here in the San Diego area that doesn't even know that they can come to the restaurant.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, there's a good example right there. Some rocking chairs out at right. That's my home airport, West Houston Airport, right there. And there's a dozen rocking chairs out there on the putting greens. You can see a couple of putting greens right there. And just out of the frame on the right hand side, there's a big blue cooler that's ice down a bottle of water in it. That's just there for the taking. And on any given Saturday morning, there'll be probably 20 or 25 pilots in there, just talking and telling lies and getting ready to figure out where we're going to go for lunch. So, building
and
that
bring the kids out.
kind of
Bring the
community.
kids out and play there.
Say again?
Bring the kids out and have them play
Yes,
and give
exactly.
them
We,
activities
we,
to do. And if we
we
can get
actually,
the youngsters involved, then we got a good chunk of this problem solved.
yeah, we actually have a really, it's a very friendly airport, and there's an upstairs area there that you can actually sit in some chairs and kind of view in air conditioned comfort what's going on outside, or sit in those chairs and just enjoy the breeze and the shade and watch the goings on. It's very, very friendly and just really, really good folks there. So, and Jamie says, two putting greens, no waiting. Jamie, go back to your Mai Tai and leave us alone, please. Anyway, look, we're running up 2 minutes overtime. I never thought we'd get an hour out of this, Kay, much less an hour and 2 minutes and 13 seconds. So do you have any closing thoughts, words of wisdom before we say sayonara?
Well, know your traffic pattern, know the areas that you're flying around, and be respectful. That'll help the entire industry.
I like that. And we're going to, after hours, I will continue reciting from the FARs. So that's all I've got. Folks, have a wonderful, wonderful evening. Thank you for joining us. Jamie, all kidding aside, I hope you feel better, or I hope your hangover gets done by tomorrow morning, because we'll be expecting you on our conference call. Catch you later, folks. Have a wonderful evening.
Good night.
Good night.